I still remember the hum of the dishwasher and the silence of the house after everyone left that Sunday. The scent of roasted turkey and apple pie lingered in the air, but the warmth of the family gathering had already faded. I kicked off my shoes, sat at the dining table, and opened my old laptop to pay a few bills before bed. It was a habit my late husband, Frank, taught me. Always know what's in your account before you sleep, Evelyn. When the bank website finally loaded, I blinked a few times, thinking the screen must be wrong. The available balance showed a number I had never seen before in my life: $0. For a second, I thought maybe I had clicked the wrong account, or it was some kind of glitch. I refreshed the page, my fingers trembling more with each click. The zero didn't move. My chest tightened, and a ringing started in my ears. That account held my savings, the cushion that made me feel safe in a world that moves much faster than I do now. I scrolled down to the recent transactions, my heart thudding so loudly I could hear it. That's when I saw a list of withdrawals I never made. Large ones, repeated ones, all within the last few weeks. I grabbed my phone and called my son, Daniel, my hands cold and sweaty at the same time. He didn't pick up. Instead, a text came through a minute later. "Mom, I'll call you tomorrow. We're tired." I stared at the screen, feeling more alone than I had in years. Then, another message popped up, this time from my daughter-in-law, Melissa. "Please don't start any drama tonight. It's late." I told her my account was empty, that something was terribly wrong. Her reply came so fast it felt rehearsed. "Pete Feff, Evelyn, maybe now you'll finally learn to let go of money. It was going to be ours anyway." In that moment, the room seemed to tilt, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. My own daughter-in-law scoffed at my panic, as if my life savings evaporating was some kind of lesson I deserved. I didn't know it yet, but that night was only the beginning of a much darker truth about my family. It hadn't always been like this with Melissa. When Daniel first brought her home 12 years ago, she arrived with a bouquet of flowers and a smile so wide it practically lit up my small living room. She called me Mrs. Carter in the sweetest voice and insisted on helping with the dishes after dinner. I thought, naively, that my son had found a kind-hearted partner. Over the years, though, that sweetness hardened into something sharper. Little comments here and there, quiet digs wrapped in polite smiles. "You shouldn't worry about money at your age," she'd say, taking bills out of my hands. "Let us handle things. You could get scammed online." At first, it sounded like concern. Then it began to feel like control. After Frank died, everything changed faster than I could process. I was grieving, lost, and suddenly responsible for paperwork I'd never touched before. Melissa moved in with ideas and color-coded folders, insisting we modernize my life. She set up online banking, automatic payments, and linked my account to her phone, just in case anything happened. I remember handing over my passwords because Daniel stood behind her, nodding. "It's easier this way, Mom," he said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Melissa's good with numbers. You don't need all that stress." I told myself they were helping. I told myself this was what family does. But a part of me, deep down, felt a small knot of unease. Soon, I stopped getting paper statements in the mail. "We went paperless to protect your information," Melissa explained, tapping her phone. "Don't worry, I check everything." Whenever I asked how things were going, she'd brush me off with a laugh. "You're fine, Evelyn. You don't spend anything anyway." I didn't realize it then, but the moment I surrendered that little bit of control, I handed her the keys to my entire financial life. I thought I was being practical, trusting my son's wife. Instead, I was quietly signing away my security, one helpful gesture at a time. That Sunday's family gathering had already felt off. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon. My son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandkids around the table, laughing and sharing stories. Melissa insisted on hosting it at my house, saying, "Your place feels more homey, Evelyn. It's better for the kids." I liked the idea. I liked feeling needed. But from the moment they arrived, Melissa moved around like she owned the place. She rearranged my dishes, criticized the old silverware, and whispered to Daniel every time I tried to share a story from the past. "The kids don't care about those old tales," she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. "They live in a different world now." At dinner, Melissa raised a toast about new beginnings and taking responsibility for the future. She talked about how hard everything had been for them lately, their bills, the mortgage, the kids' activities. I listened, trying to be sympathetic, but something in her tone sounded less like a confession and more like a justification. At one point, she looked at me and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You've had your time to enjoy life, Evelyn," she said, still holding her wine glass. "Now it's our turn to build something." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't contradict her. He just stared at his plate, cutting his meat into tiny, perfect pieces. The kids ran around the house after dessert, their laughter echoing down the hall as I collected plates. I remember thinking how lucky I was to still be here, to watch them grow. I didn't know that while we were passing the mashed potatoes and carving the turkey, my bank account had already been gutted. When they left, Melissa kissed my cheek, smelling of perfume and expensive shampoo. "Don't stay up late, Evelyn," she said, almost teasing. "At your age, sleep is the best investment." I forced a small laugh, closed the door behind them, and leaned against it for a moment. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it yet. I had no idea that the real investment she was talking about wasn't my sleep. It was my money. Back at the table, with the dishwasher humming and the house quiet, I scrolled through the transaction history line by line. There were withdrawals to a bank I didn't recognize, transfers labeled with initials I'd never seen, and cash withdrawals from ATMs across town that I couldn't have reached without a car. I haven't driven at night in years. Each line on the screen felt like a small betrayal stamped in cold, digital ink. $2,000 here. $1,500 there. Then larger amounts, $5,000, $7,200. Numbers that, for me, represented years of careful saving. Frank and I had skipped vacations, drove old cars, and wore the same winter coats for a decade to build that cushion. And now it was gone. I clicked on one of the transfers and saw the words linked account. My heart dropped. The last 4 digits didn't match any account I knew. I copied the number onto an old grocery receipt, my hands shaking so badly I could barely write. The pattern was clear. The money hadn't just disappeared. It had been siphoned. I called the bank's emergency line, my voice trembling as I explained that I believed my account had been compromised. The young man on the other end sounded polite but distant, like this was just another routine call. He asked me for verification, and I answered each question slowly, my mouth dry, my pulse racing. After a few minutes of typing on his end, he said something that made my stomach twist. "Mrs. Carter, according to our records, these transfers were made from a device we have on file as trusted. It matches the same IP address regularly used to access your account." I didn't understand all the technical terms, but I understood what he implied. Someone who already had access had done this. "Can you tell me where that other account is?" I asked, gripping the phone harder. He hesitated, then replied, "I can't disclose all the details, but the name on the linked account is Daniel Carter." For a second, I thought my hearing had failed me. My son's name, attached to the account that swallowed my life savings. The room went quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I truly felt old. I hung up with the bank and sat there, staring at the wall. My son's name echoed in my mind like an accusation I couldn't accept. Daniel, my little boy who used to bring me crayon drawings and dandelions from the yard, had access to the account that drained me. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be. I dialed his number again, my finger hovering over the call button for a moment before pressing. This time he picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Mom. It's late. Everything okay?" His voice was casual, almost annoyed, like I'd interrupted a movie. I took a deep breath, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I just checked my bank account. My savings. It's empty. The bank says the transfers went to an account under your name." There was a long pause on the other end, so long I thought the call had dropped. I checked the screen. The seconds were still ticking. He was there. He just wasn't answering. Finally, he sighed. Mom, please don't overreact. Melissa and I talked about this. We've been covering so many of your expenses, helping with your bills, and we figured it made more sense to consolidate everything. It's still for you. It's for the family. His words were smooth, too smooth, like something he'd rehearsed. For the family? I repeated, my voice cracking. Daniel, that was my money. Your father and I saved that for emergencies, for my care, for when I can't take care of myself anymore. My hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was anger. Slow, heavy anger, rising from somewhere deep inside. He exhaled sharply. You're not being fair, Mom. You don't understand how hard things are right now. We're drowning. Melissa said you'd freak out, and she was right. You're always so attached to money. It's not like you were using it anyway. In the background, I heard Melissa say something I couldn't quite catch, followed by a faint laugh. And in that moment, a part of me broke, not just as a mother, but as a woman who realized her own child had chosen convenience over her trust. The next morning, Melissa called me directly, her voice dripping with a sweetness I no longer believed. Evelyn, I heard you and Daniel talked last night, she began. You really scared him, you know. He thinks you're mad at him. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faded pattern on the tablecloth, feeling anger simmer beneath my calm tone. I am upset, Melissa, I said. My account is empty. No one told me. No one asked me. That money was my safety. She let out a little scoff, the same sound I'd seen her make at waiters, cashiers, and anyone she considered beneath her. Oh, come on. Safety? You live in a paid-off house and barely go anywhere. The money is still in the family. It's not like we spend it on vacations. I thought about the new SUV in their driveway, the private dance classes for my granddaughter, the expensive sneakers my grandson wore. Did you use my money to pay your mortgage? I asked quietly. There was a pause. A short one, but long enough to hold the truth. Then she replied, We used it to catch up on things. Things that matter. We're building a future. You should be happy we're not asking you for more. Something inside me shifted when she said that. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes when you finally accept that a line has been crossed. I realized I couldn't keep pretending they were just helping me. They weren't. They were helping themselves. And they believed I was too old, too weak, too dependent to do anything about it. Melissa, I said, my voice firming, you didn't have the right to touch that money without telling me. She sighed loudly, as if I were a stubborn child. Legally, Daniel's your power of attorney. We did it for your own good. You forget things, Evelyn. This way we can protect you from mistakes. I remembered signing papers after Frank died, my eyes blurry from tears, Melissa standing over me with a pen, saying, Just sign here. We'll take care of everything. I hadn't read the fine print. I trusted my family. Now, listening to her dismiss my fear, something solidified in me. I didn't argue further. I simply said, Thank you for letting me know, and hung up. Then, in the quiet of my kitchen, I made a silent decision. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Most people in my family had forgotten about Mr. Harlan, but I hadn't. He was the lawyer Frank and I had used for our will, a patient man with kind eyes and a habit of tapping his pen when he thought. His office was downtown, in a narrow building squeezed between a coffee shop and an old bookstore. I hadn't been there in years, but that morning I put on my best coat and called a taxi. The receptionist looked surprised when I walked in, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Mrs. Carter? She asked, scrolling through her computer. I haven't seen you in so long. I smiled politely and told her it was time I updated a few things. She led me to a small waiting area, where the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. When Mr. Harlan finally stepped out of his office, his hair was whiter and his shoulders a bit more rounded, but his eyes were the same. Evelyn, he said warmly, to what do I owe this pleasure? I followed him into his office, carefully lowering myself into the chair opposite his desk. My hands were cold, but my mind was clear. I need your help, I told him, And for the next half hour, I explained everything. The online banking, the help with bills, the empty account, the power of attorney Melissa claimed Daniel held over me. He listened without interrupting, only occasionally tapping his pen when I mentioned certain dates or documents. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a slow breath. "Evelyn, you're not the first older client to sit in that chair with this kind of story," he said gently. "Families can be complicated when money is involved." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder with my name on it, flipping through old pages yellowed at the edges. "What I need to know," I said, "is whether I'm truly as powerless as they think I am." He looked up at me, his gaze sharp. "That depends," he replied. "Do you still understand what's happening? Can you make decisions about your life, your finances, your future?" I held his stare and answered firmly, "Yes, I can." He nodded slowly. "Then, Evelyn, they might have underestimated you, and that's good news for us." Mr. Harlan pulled out a copy of the power of attorney document I had signed years ago. I remembered that day clearly now. The fog of grief, the stack of papers, Melissa hovering nearby with sympathetic eyes and a firm hand on my shoulder. At the time, it felt like relief to let someone else deal with the details. Now it felt like a trap I had walked into blindfolded. He read through the document carefully, occasionally adjusting his glasses. "This is a durable power of attorney," he explained, "which means Daniel can act on your behalf. But look here." He pointed to a paragraph buried in dense legal language. "It's contingent on you being incapacitated, unable to make your own decisions." "Did any doctor declare you incompetent, Evelyn?" I shook my head. "No. I handle my own groceries, pay my utility bills, cook my own meals. I may be slow, but I'm not gone." He nodded. "Exactly. Without that determination, their use of this document is questionable, at best. Maybe worse." Something like hope flickered in my chest, weak but alive. He asked me to describe the recent transactions and the conversation with the bank. I gave him dates, amounts, everything I could remember. He jotted notes, his handwriting neat and precise. "They moved a lot of money without your knowledge or explicit consent," he said. "And if the bank logged those transfers as coming from a trusted device linked to your account, it means someone who already had access abused that trust." I swallowed hard. "Can we do anything?" I asked. He leaned forward. "We can do more than one thing," he replied. "But first, we need to secure whatever you still have. Do you have any other accounts? CDs? Investments?" I hesitated, then nodded slowly. There was one thing I hadn't told Daniel or Melissa about, something Frank and I had set aside long ago. "I have a small investment account," I admitted. "It's not as large as the savings they took, but it's something. Frank always said, never put all your eggs in one basket, especially when people start reaching for the basket." Mr. Harlan smiled, faintly. "Your husband was a wise man. We're going to move that something somewhere safer, somewhere they can't touch. And then, if you're willing, we're going to build a case." That afternoon, Mr. Harlan helped me call the investment firm where my small nest egg sat quietly, untouched for years. We spoke with a representative, and I answered their security questions one by one. My voice shook, but I remained focused. I authorized moving the funds into a new account, one that would be held in a trust Mr. Harlan would help me establish, under strict terms that Daniel and Melissa knew nothing about. "It's not just about the money they don't know about," he said as we finished the paperwork. "It's about ensuring you still have control over your life. They may have taken a large bite, but they haven't swallowed everything yet." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of anger and relief. We drafted a new will as well, one that reflected the reality of who had truly cared for me and who had tried to use me. I adjusted the beneficiaries. I added conditions. I even included a letter to be read aloud if this will was ever contested. Not out of spite, at least that's what I told myself, but out of a need for the truth to be spoken, even if I wasn't there to say it. "When people show you who they are, Evelyn," Mr. Harlan said softly, "it's not your job to excuse them. It's your job to decide what you do with that information." I thought of Daniel's annoyed tone, Melissa's scoff, and the way they spoke about my money as if it had already been theirs. I just never imagined my own child would see me as a burden, I whispered. He looked at me with something like pity, but also respect. You're not a burden, he said. You're a woman who worked, saved, and trusted the wrong people. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. What you do now, that's where your strength lies. As I left his office, clutching a folder filled with new documents and possibilities, I felt lighter. Not happy. Not yet. But less helpless than I'd felt the night before. And that was a start. For a few days, I didn't confront them. I watched instead. From the small distance that a mother can rarely achieve, I observed their social media posts. Yes, I have Facebook, even if I'm slow with it. Melissa uploaded photos of the kids at a trampoline park, Daniel smiling beside them. All of them in matching outfits. Family Day, the caption read, followed by heart emojis. 2 days later, a picture of their new living room set appeared. Finally upgraded this old couch. Melissa wrote, I recognized the same couch she'd complained about for months, saying they couldn't afford to replace it. Now suddenly they could. I wondered if they looked at that new furniture and thought of the woman whose bank account had silently paid for it. Meanwhile, my phone stayed mostly quiet. No one called to check how I was feeling after the misunderstanding. No one apologized. Instead, I got a single text from Daniel. We'll come by next weekend, Mom. Maybe we can help you with your budget so you don't stress so much. The words felt like salt rubbed into a wound they refused to see. I went about my days as usual, watering my plants, cooking simple meals, knitting a scarf I'd started months ago. On the outside, everything looked normal. But inside, I was building a different kind of pattern, a plan, carefully stitched together with every small detail I now understood. When my friend Gloria called to invite me to bingo night at the community center, I almost said no. I didn't feel like pretending to be cheerful. But then I realized I needed a break from my own thoughts. So I went, sat under the bright fluorescent lights, dabbed numbers on paper, and listened to the chatter of other women my age. At one point, Gloria leaned over and whispered, You look tired, Evelyn. Everything okay at home? For a moment, I thought about spilling everything. Instead, I just smiled faintly and said, I'm learning who my family really is. She patted my hand and nodded. Sometimes that's the most expensive lesson we ever pay for, she replied. Her words stayed with me long after the last bingo card was cleared. The following week, I called Daniel and invited them over for Sunday afternoon tea. My voice was calm, cheerful even. I thought it would be nice to have some quiet time, just us, I said. Melissa quickly jumped in, her tone overly bright. Of course, Evelyn. The kids love going to your house. We'll be there. Before they arrived, I set the table in the dining room with my best china, the set I usually reserved for holidays. The house smelled of freshly baked cookies and lemon-scented furniture polish. On the surface, it looked like any other family visit. But this time, there was something hidden beneath the lace tablecloth, a small recording device tucked into the centerpiece, quietly waiting. Mr. Harlan had suggested I gather clear proof of their intentions, and I intended to do just that. When they walked in, Melissa kissed my cheek and complimented the cookies. Daniel hugged me, his embrace quick and slightly stiff. The kids ran to the living room, already arguing about which cartoon to watch. We sat down at the table, and I poured tea into their cups, my hand steady. I've been thinking a lot about what you both said, I began, stirring a sugar cube into my own tea. About the money, about the future. Melissa leaned forward, curiosity flickering in her eyes. We're glad, she said. We just want what's best for everyone, Evelyn. For the family. I nodded slowly. That's what I want too. So, I was hoping you could explain again what you did with my savings. Just so I understand. I'm old, but I'd like to know what happened to the money your father and I spent decades putting aside. Daniel shifted in his chair, glancing at Melissa. She took a sip of her tea and smiled. We didn't take it, Evelyn, she said, the words smooth as cream. We moved it. Consolidated it. Daniel has it in his account now with ours. It's safer that way. One household. One future. When you need something, we'll provide it. You don't need to worry about numbers and balances anymore. I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch just enough. "So," I asked gently, "the money is in your control now?" Melissa gave a little shrug. "Basically, yes. It's more efficient. And honestly, it was going to come to us eventually. We just sped up the process." Her words hung in the air, heavier than the steam rising from our teacups. "We sped up the process." Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't correct her. That silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. I felt my heart squeeze, but my face remained calm, almost serene. "Daniel," I said softly, turning to him, "is that how you see it too? That my savings were just yours, waiting on a shelf?" He ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "Mom, you know we've been struggling. The kids' tuition, the house, everything is so expensive. We figured it made sense to put the money where it could really help. You don't go anywhere. You don't have big needs. We do." I could have shouted. I could have cried or begged. Instead, I let them keep talking. Melissa, sensing I hadn't exploded like she expected, leaned in further. "You said yourself you worry about being a burden," she added. "This way, you're not. We took that pressure off you. You should be grateful, Evelyn." The word grateful twisted in my gut like a knife. "So, you believe I should be grateful for losing access to my own money?" I asked, my voice still calm. "Grateful that my security is now stored in an account I can't even see?" Melissa rolled her eyes ever so slightly. "You're not listening. You can see it through us. We're your family. What's ours is yours, and what's yours is ours. That's how it works." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of regret, any hint that this wasn't what he truly believed. But all I saw was tiredness and a kind of resigned selfishness. He wanted his life to be easier, and if that meant rooting through the savings his parents had left, so be it. "I see," I said finally, taking a sip of tea to steady myself. Inside, my heart was breaking. But at the same time, a colder, sharper part of me was taking notes. They weren't just mistaken. They weren't just careless. They had convinced themselves they were entitled to what wasn't theirs yet, and that I should thank them for the favor. And thanks to the little device under the centerpiece, every arrogant word was being quietly preserved. After tea, the kids begged for cookies and ran outside to play in the yard. Melissa wandered into the living room to scroll through her phone, and Daniel helped me clear the table. The air between us felt thick, heavy with everything we had just said. He stacked plates while I dried them, the clink of porcelain filling the silence. "Mom," he started, not looking at me. "Melissa's just blunt sometimes. She didn't mean to upset you." I folded a dish towel slowly. "She didn't upset me," I replied quietly. "She clarified things." He frowned. "Clarified what?" I turned to him, meeting his eyes. "That you both believe my money stopped being mine the moment I got old." He opened his mouth to protest, then shut it again. "It's not like that," he muttered. "You make it sound cruel. We're just trying to survive." I nodded. "Everyone's trying to survive, Daniel. The difference is I never stole from you to do it." The word "stole" made him stiffen. "We didn't steal. You gave us the power of attorney." "I gave you trust," I corrected him. "There's a difference." He sighed heavily and set the stack of plates down too hard, making the top one rattle. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "You always do this. You hold on to things. Money, memories, control. You make it so hard to help you." In that moment, I realized I had spent years protecting his feelings, softening my words, excusing his absences, forgiving his thoughtless comments. I did it because he was my child, and mothers are taught to endure, to absorb the blows in silence. But as I looked at the man in front of me, willing to justify draining my savings, I felt that instinct slip away. "I think it's time you both understood something," I said, my voice steady. "I may be old, but I am not blind. I am not helpless. And I am not your personal bank. You didn't just take money, Daniel. You took trust. And once that's gone, it's not easily replaced." He stared at me, stunned, as if seeing me for the first time in years. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I gave him a small, sad smile. "You'll find out soon enough." The next day, I returned to Mr. Harlan's office with the recording device in my purse. I felt like a schoolgirl carrying a forbidden note, except this time the note contained the truth about the people closest to me. We sat down in his office, and I placed the device on his desk. They talked, I said simply, and they were very honest. He played the recording, listening carefully as Melissa and Daniel explained how they had consolidated my money, how it was going to be theirs anyway, how I should be grateful not to worry about it anymore. His expression grew tighter with each passing minute, the lines around his mouth deepening. When it ended, he tapped his pen slowly, thoughtfully. "Well," he said at last, "if the bank and any court were unsure about their intentions before, this certainly makes things clearer." He explained my options. We could file a complaint with the bank, challenge the transfers, and, if necessary, pursue legal action for financial exploitation of an elderly person. The words sounded heavy, serious, but strangely empowering. "Will this ruin their lives?" I asked quietly. Despite everything, part of me still saw my little boy in Daniel's face. Mr. Harlan sighed. "There may be consequences," he said. "But right now, they're living quite comfortably off money that was not theirs to take. Sometimes the only way people learn where the line is when they're forced to face it." We began drafting letters, one to the bank, demanding a formal investigation, and another to Daniel, informing him that his power of attorney was being revoked. I signed my name with a firm hand, feeling each stroke of the pen as a small reclaiming of myself. "Evelyn," Mr. Harlan said softly as I stood to leave, "you're doing something very difficult. But you're not doing it out of revenge. You're doing it to protect yourself. And whether your son realizes it or not, you're also teaching him a lesson nobody else ever did." I nodded, blinking back tears. For the first time since I'd seen that zero on my screen, I felt like I was no longer just reacting. I was acting. A week later, I invited them over again. This time, there were no cookies, no fancy china, no cozy decorations. I sat at the head of the dining table, a folder of documents in front of me, and waited. My hands shook slightly, but my resolve did not. When they arrived, Melissa was all smiles, but her expression faltered when she saw my serious posture. "Is everything okay, Evelyn?" she asked, glancing nervously at the folder. Daniel remained standing, his jaw tight. "Sit down," I said, my voice calm but firm. They obeyed, exchanging confused looks. I opened the folder and slid 2 envelopes across the table, one addressed to Daniel, the other to Melissa. "What's this?" Daniel asked. "A goodbye to your illusions," I replied. "Go ahead. Read." They opened the envelopes. Inside Daniel's was the letter revoking his power of attorney, along with a notice that a formal complaint had been filed with the bank regarding the unauthorized transfers. Inside Melissa's was a copy of the same complaint and a transcript of key parts of our recorded conversation. Her face went pale. You recorded us?" she stammered. "You tricked us?" I shook my head. "I gave you an opportunity to speak the truth. You chose your words. I just preserved them." Daniel's hands began to tremble as he scanned the documents. "Mom, this is serious. You could get us into legal trouble." "No," I corrected him gently. "You got yourselves into legal trouble. I'm simply refusing to pretend I don't see it." I told them about the new trust, the new will, the steps Mr. Harlan and I had taken to secure what remained of my assets. I told them I had spoken to an advocate for elder financial abuse and that I was fully prepared to cooperate with any investigation. Melissa's voice rose, anger replacing fear. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" she shouted. "You're going to ruin your own family over money?" I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my years and the strength of my decision. "I'm not ruining my family," I said. "I'm refusing to let my family ruin me." The kids, hearing the raised voices from the living room, peeked around the corner, eyes wide. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was showing them what self-respect looks like. A few months have passed since that day. The investigation is still ongoing, and I don't know yet how much of my stolen savings will be recovered, if any. Daniel and Melissa don't visit as often now. When they do, it's tense, quiet, careful. Sometimes they come alone, sometimes with the kids, but the easy laughter we once shared has been replaced with a cautious distance. Do I miss the way things were? In some ways, yes. I miss believing my family would never harm me. I miss assuming that love and gratitude were enough to protect what I had built with my husband. But illusions are like old wallpaper, comforting from a distance until you look closely and see the cracks. Once you've seen them, it's hard to pretend they're not there. I've learned to live more simply. I keep a close eye on my accounts now, checking them carefully every week. I meet with Mr. Harlan regularly and consult people who know how to navigate the world I once handed off blindly. I'm not as fast as I used to be, but I am more deliberate, more awake. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I sit by the window and watch the sun go down, thinking about the word empty. My bank account was empty that night after the family gathering, yes. But the real emptiness I felt wasn't about numbers on a screen. It was the hollow space where trust used to live. Money, I've realized, can be earned, saved, lost, and sometimes reclaimed. Trust, once broken, rarely returns unchanged. If you're listening to my story and you're older like me, I want you to remember this. Your age does not erase your rights. You are not a burden for wanting security. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for protecting what you've worked for is showing you exactly who they are. Believe them. My daughter-in-law scoffed when she thought my empty account meant I had finally become powerless. She forgot one important thing. A woman who has survived grief, raised a child, and built a life out of almost nothing is never truly powerless. Not as long as she still has a voice and the courage to use it.